Well, thanks everyone for being here and for having us. I work for an international human rights organization called Witness, based out of New York and working all over the world. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to actually address the logistics component of what Regina was talking about. And I'm going to basically address the question of what should a first-time or a beginning advocate or activist know before they go out into the field to capture video. And there's a lot they should know, but with the few minutes we have today, I'm actually only going to highlight 3 points, and I'm going to look at this from both a international and a domestic perspective, and then I'll end by giving you resources. I want to start, though, by reiterating something that Jethro said. You know, protests can range everywhere from fairly safe, like with the Keystone Pipeline. The chances of losing your life are pretty minimal. It's possible, but minimal. Or they can be very serious. Those are the people that I tend to work with, people who are literally putting their lives on the line every day to film documentation of human rights abuses. So the 3 points that I'm about to make need to be adapted. They need to be adapted to the Keystone type scenario, and they also need to be adapted to a more insecure sort of situation. So the first key point, I'm actually going to bounce off of something Nadine said, goal. And that's the first thing that I tell activists. You need to know why you are going out and filming, if at all possible. And the reason why you need to know that, which Melina and Harvey will talk about, is it will inform 1, what you capture, and 2, how you technically capture it. The other reason is because it determines whether using video is the best use of your time and your money. So to go back to something Daniel said, or what Daniel talked about, I believe wholeheartedly that some of the best movements are multidisciplinary. And if you look at what Daniel and his movement did, that was protest grassroots led, but they also used the press, and they also eventually went to court. So they used a bunch of different approaches, and while I wholeheartedly believe that video is a powerful tool and that it will be incorporated into all of our work, I really emphasize with people the strengths and limitations of when you should determine when you should use it or not. And I'm going to illustrate this by giving 2 examples. If my goal, as Nadine said, is to hold Assad accountable for war crimes and crimes against humanity, and I am at an abandoned headquarters of the regime, and the FSA is protecting me, the filmmaker and the documenter, to go into that abandoned headquarters, and I have my camera with me. I have choices to make. I can scoop documents, or I can do a video walkthrough of that headquarters or several other things. But if I have 30 minutes and I understand that most international criminal cases are based 80% on documents and a much smaller percentage on imagery, I'm going to use that 30 minutes and I'm going to set my camera down and I'm going to scoop those documents and I'm going to take them back to where I can analyze them. And then if I have time, I'm going to pick up my camera. So that goal, knowing that I want to hold Assad accountable, is going to dictate actually what I do when I get on the premises. So it's the same in a protest situation. If I go into a protest situation and I've got my camera, I need to know why I'm there filming. If I have 10 minutes before I'm going to get tear gassed, or before I believe I'm going to get tear gassed, am I going to capture the broad protest? Am I going to capture weapons that people are carrying? Am I going to capture badge numbers? Am I going to capture the injuries of people who have already been hurt on the protest? And knowing why I am filming, why I am picking up the camera, is going to help me determine what to do with that 10 minutes. So that's the very first thing that we talk to activists about. The second thing that we talk to activists about is, if possible, we tell them to film for justice and accountability. And what I mean by that is there's typically 2 processes going on in a protest situation. There's human rights advocacy and media advocacy, and the general, and I'm going to really simplify this because we have a little bit of time, but generally speaking, the goal of human rights advocacy and media advocacy is to get something to stop now. So get Obama to sign the denial of the Keystone Pipeline. In Egypt, it's to get President Mubarak out and his regime out. So to stop something now. That's the goal. With justice and accountability, that tends to be more for tomorrow, because that's when you actually want to hold the perpetrators of crimes accountable in a court of law later. So if the regime in Syria comes in, or if the military in Egypt comes in and summarily executes people or detains people or tortures people, you have to collect the information at the protest, but you're going to use it later, possibly even years later, in a court of law. So goals are different. Stop and achieve your goal, as Nadine said, as soon as possible, and possibly raise awareness through the media. And with justice and accountability, it's to hold perpetrators accountable and to convict down the road. That means your audience is different. So if your goal is to get Assad out of office right now, your audience right now is the heads of state, heads of the UK, heads of the US, heads of France, heads of Russia, heads of China. If you want to hold Assad accountable down the road 5 years from now, your audience is the judge. And the reason why that's key, as many lawyers in the room know, is that there's two different standards of proof. Again, I'm simplifying. But very simply speaking, your standard of proof for human rights advocacy is reasonable grounds to believe that the information you're collecting, including the video information, is 51% or more accurate. So you don't have to have an absolute guarantee. But when you get into a court of law and you're trying to hold a perpetrator of a crime accountable, your burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. So 99% accurate, depending upon what court you're in. So what we talk to activists about is that if it's possible to film for justice and accountability, to film it that we're 95 to 99% sure that all of this is completely accurate, you will be able to use that for media advocacy. You will be able to use that for human rights advocacy. But if you just film at that 51% level, you are not guaranteed that someday down the road that you could actually use that in a court of law, which I think Larry's going to speak to a little bit later. So we don't want that 99 to beyond a reasonable doubt to stop people from filming, but it's something that if we can slightly modify how activists film, slightly modify their actions and how they capture and how they collect and how they archive film, then we will work with them so that it can serve the dual purposes someday. And the third point is really simple, and sometimes it's not always doable. But what we work with activists to do is set up a safety and a security plan ahead of time, so that when they go out in the field and they're risking their lives to capture this video, they can ideally be safe about it. And we know that that's not always going to be the case, especially with the situations in the Middle East. But we also teach them what the strengths and limitation of video are, because if there's no them, there's going to be no information. So we want them to really think about, is this going to be worth it? Is my going into a detention center and having a half hour before regime forces come back, is it going to be worth my time of risking my life to actually collect information that's going to help with human rights advocacy, media advocacy, or in a court of law someday? So those are the 3 points that I wanted to highlight. And then I just wanted to mention that Witness has a number of resources. We have reference sheets on how to film protests and rallies. We have reference sheet on how to film in teams. We actually have a video that teaches activists like the basic tips for filming protests. And one of the things we're working on, and I would love all of your inputs. We're working on a guide for video. It'll probably be called Visualize Justice, and it's video for evidence. So if anyone would like to make a contribution to that guide, review the guide, be a part of it in any way, what it will do is it'll be structured like a field guide, just like if you're going on a hike in the woods and looking for flowers. It'll have all the basics up front, and then it'll get specific out back. How do you film a secure incident scene? How do you add narration to a video so that it's not more prejudicial than probative for all the lawyers in here? So if you want to be involved with that, I can certainly tell you more. I'll be here all day, and I'm going to pass it over to Melina.